The FDA is on the verge of effectively banning trans fats in the U.S. For decades, the additives have been used to improve texture and lengthen shelf life of food. The risks, heart disease, and heart attacks are well known. It's a battle one scientist has been waging for nearly 60 years. Lisa Stark has the story.
For nearly 6 decades on this Midwest college campus in Champaign, Illinois, one man has been sounding the alarm against trans fat. Meet Fred Kummerow, Ph.D., biochemist, adjunct professor, and he will mark his 101st birthday in October.
You can run your fingers over it, and then you can see there are plaques there.
In Kummerow's lab, he still stores some of the arteries that he has studied over the years. His work on heart disease began in the 1950s after he asked a local hospital to send him samples from patients who had died from heart attacks. Artificial trans fat is created by adding hydrogen to vegetable oil to make it more stable. That improves a food's texture and shelf life. Trans fat is found in some processed foods, including microwave popcorn, crackers, cookies, cake frosting. When Kummerow first reported his findings in the 1950s, he did not know how or if trans fat affected the body.
I just had instinct that this was not a good fat. This was not a right fat.
With the public growing worried, food companies from McDonald's to Nabisco, the maker of Oreos, began cutting back. The food industry says it has voluntarily lowered the amount of trans fats in food by over 73%, and that product safety is its first priority. But the FDA finally has made a preliminary finding that trans fats in processed foods are, quote, not generally recognized as safe.
Dr. Devi is a physician and associate professor at NYU Medical Center, and she's in our studio tonight. Welcome back, Doctor.
Nice to see you.
So there are two types of trans fat, right?
Right. So there are trans fats that are naturally found in animals, and then there's what we're talking about mostly, which are the processed trans fats.
Why are they bad?
So there are a lot of different reasons. I mean, most of the evidence is about heart disease. There's one estimate that about 20% of the deaths related to heart disease that we have each year could be prevented just by eliminating trans fats.
So there's a huge potential risk there.
Exactly.
And what about the labeling that we see on food right now? Does it accurately tell us whether there's trans fat in the food?
Not necessarily. So you can see things that sometimes say trans fat free, because what they're doing is they're estimating. So let's say if you have a number like 0.4, anything less than 0.5 grams, you can estimate it as closer to 0, right, or round it down. So sometimes things can say that they're fat free or trans fat free when that may not actually be the case. But when you're talking about small amounts like this, where even a small amount causes a lot of harm, then if you get a little here and a little there, it can really add up.
So we don't know. When we go to the food store and we see these labels, no trans fat, not necessarily true.
Not necessarily true. And if you think of most people, I mean, how many people have the time to really read through all these labels and figure this out?
Do you talk to your patients about this?
Sometimes, but to be fair, you know, it's a little bit difficult because there are so many things that they have to worry about in terms of nutrition, obesity, and then this, even though it's been going on for a long time, I think it hasn't necessarily gotten all the attention that it deserved. So I'm glad that the FDA is making this move. I think it's so widespread, though, that these trans fats are in everything that most people like to eat as their snacks, right? Cookies and cakes and stuff, so hard.
If it's eliminated, what will that mean for the country? What will it mean for our health?
Well, on the surface, you know, it should be good for our health to get rid of something that seems to be so dangerous. But at the same time, then you have to wonder, what are food manufacturers going to replace these trans fats with? So if we just look at the history, actually the people who came up with this process, they won the Nobel Prize for it, because at that time, you know, by doing this, they thought they were making food safer and preserving the freshness. We didn't have the refrigeration that we have now. But at the same time now, you know, if we get rid of this, what are we going to bring in its place? So that's one of the things to wonder about.
One of the big concerns. If it could just be natural, right?
Exactly.
All right. Dr. Devi, it's good to see you. Thanks very much for joining us tonight.